Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to my podcast. My guest today is Tony Eade from Sydney in Australia, currently working on the Cross River Rail mega project in Brisbane. Tony is very well known in the Australian railway industry and probably beyond. We are talking about why 2024 is a special year. What is shutdown fatigue? The difference between normal regular change and transformational change, key questions for change management, explain what double gold plating is, and explore the telltale sign of a good leader. Please enjoy my conversation with Tony Eade. Hi, this is Doc Frank. I need to tell you about my brand new cutting edge 2024 training, Digital Signaling Interoperability. Interoperability is such a huge issue, not just here in Australia, but in other countries as well. Everywhere where you've got different railway authorities with cross traffics between each other. This course has the latest insights, the latest research. This training includes the SPA framework, Systems, Products and Applications, which creates a lot of clarity and avoids confusion in that area. We then look at the different technologies for digital signaling in Australia. And this is just an example that is transferable to many, many other countries in the world. We then give detailed introductions to the main technologies used in Australia, which are CBTC, ETCS and ATMS. Then we discuss the hierarchy of interoperability controls, the different ways how interoperability can be handled and addressed. A special session on CBTC interoperability between CBTC products from different suppliers. Then we look at ETCS interoperability. And if you think that comes automatic just by using ETCS, you need to think again. This lesson will address how interoperability in practice can be achieved with ETCS, and it does require some work. And then lastly, interoperability between different technologies. What is required to do that, to achieve that? Which options are available and what is arguably the best? You can get access to this fantastic brand new training under docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. I repeat that again, docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. If this is a topic of concern for you and your railway organization, then don't miss this training. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey Frank, how you going? Long time no hear.
That's true. That's very true. We've known each other for a while, and I always admired how informative you were, for example, at conference presentations, very, very well prepared, fantastic slide packs. And what I also admired about you was the way that you could explain things in a very simple and understandable way for the normal person on site or for people in an audience or something like that. So I thought you would make a fantastic guest for the audience. One of the biggest problems I have is how to introduce you without that eating up the first half hour of the podcast, because you've done so much in your career. I would like to leave that to you. If you can just give in a couple of minutes some highlight of your very varying career, varying in a positive way, diverse career, I think I should say. Just give us a quick intro where you have been and where you are today.
Yeah, okay, Frank. Well, I will keep it very, very brief because a lot of people that probably will listen to the pod know my background. But basically, I've been blessed to, spend 45 years now in the rail industry proper. 40 years of that was in the Sydney Trains network and a bit of CEO bus work as well in Sydney. But predominantly, I've come up through the grades. I started as a junior porter back in 1980 and then just kept coming up through the grades until one of my highlights was graduating as a train controller. That's a very hard thing to do. And about 1991, I think I graduated as a train controller and then moved up through the ranks fairly quick after that. The other highlight was, being responsible for the rail transport task in Sydney for the Olympics and Paralympics. But it goes deeper than that because I've spent quality time with some very smart people in the planning space, untangling the Sydney rail network to what we experience today. I can remember when we're so integrated as a train plan that, if something went wrong, you destroyed the whole network. Well, today, when you look back at, 20, 25 years of untangling that railway, today's Sydney rail network is just sectored. You go up and down 3 different sectors and hopefully I've left now for the last 3 years, but hopefully we'll get to a point where, you can actually keep each sector running effectively. So when I left that, I then was asked to come up to give them a hand in Cross River Rail. And I've been up here now for 3 years, which has gone relatively quick. We've done some amazing work up here in Cross River Rail. The SEQ network, from Queensland Rail's perspective, they're going to inherit an amazing railway that's connected to their existing railway. But the community of Queensland will be the biggest winners of the lot because right now they don't have a train directly to the heart of the CBD. We're going to provide that product for them. And then secondly, the biggest station they've got, as in Gabba, where they've got major events happening very frequently, we're providing an underground network that can have, that can service thousands of people every hour. And then like so at the exhibition where we built a brand new event station that's going to open up and keep running 24/7. Timetable might run, trains might not run 24/7, but that station will be fundamentally open, where today it's only open twice a year. So these are big ticket item stuff that, that we're putting up in here, supported by new technology, supported by, ETCS level 2 with an ATO overlay. I think they're on a winner here. And, that's where I am right now, still working it out. We're getting, big year 2024 and we're working through what we need to do to continue on to get this railway opened up in the next couple of years.
Great. Yeah, so that you are the person for the more difficult or challenging task, I think that's well known in the industry. Well, what I noticed really as a highlight was that you changed now into a project management role as the deputy project director for this project for Cross River Rail, which is the premier rail infrastructure project in Queensland, I think, ever of all times. And previously you mentioned the Olympic Games in Sydney back in 2000, which was still relatively at the beginning of your career, so a big task as well.
Yep.
And untangling what was countrywide notorious as the spaghetti network in Sydney is certainly quite a big task as well. But how would you compare these line management roles that you did most recently in Sydney with a project management role as you do now in Cross River? So not going too much into the specifics, but more like a comparison. Is it basically the same in that you are dealing with people and try to convince them of what the right way to go forward is, or do you see any major differences between line management and project management?
Well, fundamentally, there is a significant difference, if I can say. Now, someone like myself has always been an operator maintainer. So I'm used to running railways, fixing things on the hop, building timetables, introducing them into the network, new rolling stock, a whole lot of possession changes and what have you. I'm now sitting in a client-side role. And client-side role is all about managing contracts, managing expectations, getting the contractors to deliver time, cost, quality type arrangements. And yes, you have a hell of a lot of stakeholders to deal with. And we've got, for example, Queensland Rail. I see ourselves as the client to Queensland Rail. We're out here delivering the Cross River Rail project, but we're going to hand it to Queensland Rail. And when we hand it to them, they're going to have to run that for the next 150 years and then build off that as an enabler for the rest of the projects coming through, in particular right through to the Olympics that they've got coming up in 10 years from today. So there is a substantial difference between being on the client side and the operator. Well, my background and experience, I've lived now both worlds, and I find myself frequently, in fact, 80% of my time is working with the operator in Queensland Rail, working through some of the stuff because, quite frankly, Queensland hasn't had major work like this done since the early 70s. So when we, apart from the Moreton Bay line in 2016, so when you put in so much transformational change on an organisation that's used to running a particular way, you need to give them time to absorb it, and you need to walk them through some of those fundamental changes. Like we talk off-the-shelf products as an example, they talk bespoke products, and how do you actually make the two work? We talk high technology, signalling technology that's, automated. They talk applications that they're used to today. It's not that they not embracing the change. I think Queensland Rail are going to embrace this, and they're going to really love what they end up with Cross River Rail. It's more around the fact that we need to take them on the journey. They need to see and feel, touch and smell this railway for them to be able to embrace what they're about to achieve. And we've got some really smart people in Cross River Rail who are educating, through either AI type arrangements or through, the BIM modelling that we do, or even right through the experience centre we have. All those elements come together that tell a story. And the story is not just about building railways and then building into the network. The story is about how we're evolving Queensland Rail to be a modern railway, to handle the demand and the growth of the future, to handle big events that are coming through the churn, but more importantly, to start turning the dial about, you will build them, they will come type thing. They're big on buses up here, more so than trains, but I tell you what, the train network that's building, moving towards a 3-sector model, getting that embedded into the railway, I think will be a lot for Queensland Rail to really embrace it. And the community of SEQ, as in the customer, the community, the people who use the network, will absolutely embrace this.
We will come back to transformational change in just a moment, because I know from your profile on LinkedIn that this is one of your key areas of focus, so to say. Before we do that, one other thing that you just triggered with your response, you mentioned what's called the project management triangle, time, cost, and quality. What I came up with a few years ago, and which is now part of my CBTC trainings as well, is a fourth aspect, which is very strongly process focused, delivery focused, and this is to deliver a project at cost, in budget, and for the expected quality, without disrupting the existing services too much. And especially in a brownfield environment like you have in Brisbane there for Cross River, this is a very, very important thing where you can really mess up the network big time and almost scare passengers away, because they can't rely anymore. When is the railway running? And will it run when I get home from work, or will there be another shutdown that I didn't notice or I didn't hear about in time, and then I'm basically stranded and so on. So what are you doing? I'm pretty sure you're focusing on delivering Cross River without doing too much damage to the surrounding, I guess. Are there any things that come to mind which you want to highlight what you're doing there?
Absolutely. There's a whole lot of variants and differences that we do or consider when we're talking about taking a possession, especially if you think about it. If you try and build what we're building up here, the Cross River Rail Network, and just take every weekend to build it, it's going to take you 10 to 15 years or 20 years to build it. So obviously that no one's going to get the benefit of that. So what we do is now we look at areas where it's quiet on the network, and we take possessions for longer periods of time to enable to get as much work as we can do across those corridors in readiness, so that way we move one step closer to bringing in Cross River Rail. A good example of that was last Christmas, New Year's. We closed the line on Boxing Day, and then we kept it closed right through till the 19th of January. And during that period of time, we absolutely took advantage of reconstructing the north side, changing up the Mayne Yard facilities area, getting ready for the northern tie-in of the Cross River Rail line, building bridges. A whole lot of stuff had occurred during those 28-day close down. But none of that is possible unless we take those sort of angles. Now, we know Christmas, New Year, the numbers are low. We know in Easter, the numbers are low. We know in June, during school holidays, the numbers are low. And we certainly know in September, Where there's school holidays, the numbers are low again. But that doesn't give you the green light to just go out there and close the line and start ripping that up and getting ready to put people back on it on the Monday morning after you finish. No, there's got to be an all-agency approach to how we manage that. We have to consider the customer. We have to consider how the bus network is going to operate. There's many different alterations to the timetable that we need to apply to make this thing work. You've got to balance sets. You've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. And more importantly, you need to do a multi-criteria assessment across all aspects of this that possession. And then you've got to put the bid in to make sure you can get it. And if you get through all those assessments and every angle of this is covered off, then we allow the possession to go ahead. But the real essence of this is making sure you communicate it really relatively early to the commuters and the customers that are going to use it. But importantly, you have to focus on whether or not the customer becomes fatigued in all of this as well. When I talk about fatigue, if you're consistently closing the line time and time again and they're consistently having to get off a train, back on the bus, get on a train again, they do get fatigued with that. They get frustrated. And we need to make sure that every time we do this, we actually hold a debrief. We look at all the complaints. We look at anything that comes through there and see how we can do it better for the next time we do it. And if you consistently learn and evolve by doing that time and time and time again, you'll end up in a position where you will have a formula that the customers can get used to, your operators become very familiar with, and you can get the staging of the possession and the planning of the possession and all the scope of works to do. You can all tie the whole lot into one big mix. And if it all works for you at the end of the day, when you turn the power back on that Monday morning at 0200 hours to run trains that day, it should all work. And I can tell you, we've had success so far, and I'm touching wood as I speak to you because we've got a big one coming up from this Wednesday. So I don't want to jinx myself on that one, but that's how it's working at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Moreton Bay Link, which had a major infrastructure interface, but it was more at the periphery of the network and only affected one line, whereas the work that you're doing at the Northern Portal is smack bang in the core of the network, where every railway line of the Brisbane suburban network runs through. So any disruption there has literally a ripple effect across pretty much everything. So that the planning must be very difficult. And I think the only example which might be even more disruptive if you're uprooting an entire railway line. I'm thinking of the Armadale line here in Perth, which is currently closed down for 18 months. And I don't even want to imagine what the effect will be on the passengers, but for whatever reason, they think they can't get it done any faster. So they rather said, okay, well, we just shut it down. Of course, there will be bus replacement services and all kinds of stuff. So they're really trying hard to communicate this to the public as good as they can, but still there will be consequences, I guess, on patronage if you shut down a railway line for this long. Or as you say, there is a fatigue if you don't do it this long, but you do it more often. Yeah, so it's always a bit of a balance.
Yep, well, you're quite right in terms of the Northern Corridor where we're playing. I've articulated up here as their spine of the railway. Now, if you break your spine, you're pretty much in a lot of hurt and a lot of trouble. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking a 120-year-old operating network and overlaying today's technology on top of it. Various stages of slewing tracks and putting new turnouts and new gantries and new overhead registration, new substations, all that sort of stuff is completely different than what they were, 20, 30 years ago, and overlaying what's available. And then remember, we're built around a river here, so you're doing the best ever drainage system you can possibly think of to help, during those periods of those heavy rains that Queensland have come accustomed to keep the water running, so you can keep the networks. And quite frankly, Mayne Yard has got Mayne Yard West, Mayne Yard East, Mayne Yard North. It's got all of some high-level maintenance in the area. It's also, I'm not sure what the percentage, but it's more than half of the fleet start out of there in the morning. So it is exactly like Clyde and Auburn, if you picture that as a relatively simple, comparison. And here we are in the middle of it, ripping it apart and putting it back together so we can get two cross-river rail lines side by side of it. Yeah. Where else would you go and build a brand new stabling yard with 17 roads, decamp facilities, a graffiti removal shed, a brand new train crew shared facility. So that way you can actually just put 2 Cross River rail lines through. We take the trains out of Mayne Yard East, we put them into Mayne Yard North, and that's been functioning for 12 months. And now we're ripping apart Mayne Yard East, so we can slew the tracks to get our Cross River rail lines through. And at the end of the day, Queensland Rail will end up with an additional facility now that they can stable for future growth. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out of this, but the true winners will be the community and the customers for generations to come. And the stations that are building underground and the artwork that's associated with them is first class. But above ground, there's stations here. I was horrified when I first came up here. You step in 400 millimetres up onto the train in some cases. Well, we're bringing the platform and the door equally level to the Cross River Rail stations and putting, rubber fingers through there, so that way there's, the disability can just roll straight on. It is amazing stuff what's happening here. So, and it's a good investment for Queensland, and it'll continue to go. Now, I'm no politician. I don't want to sound like one either, but I'm a hard operator, and I know from all the time I spent running in Sydney, the railway network there, the importance of managing the DDA requirements, managing, that train to platform interface. And up here, we've sort of invested heavily to make sure that works from the Cross River Rail network. So it's a good story, Frank. It's a really, really good story. And kudos to the guys who planned this in the early days. They've done a fantastic job in getting it to where they are.
Yeah. It sounds like a very good project, and then I'm pretty sure Queenslanders can be very proud of that. So let's go back to transformational change. You mentioned in a previous response that you had stakeholders, for example, with the operator Queensland Rail, and a couple of examples where you needed to get them from, should I say, an old way of thinking to a new way of thinking, or to the novel things that the project introduces. And I can imagine, or I know from my other experiences, that this is a major challenge. And that's not to say that Queensland Rail would be like old-fashioned or anything like that. It's just that people, for their entire careers, have never seen anything like that, what you're now introducing, for example, with ETCS level 2, let alone an ATO overlay, which is automatic train operation. So they basically need to take something where they built their entire careers on, which may not be that relevant or that conducive for the new world that's been introduced by the Cross River Rail project. How difficult is this, and what ideas and what concepts are you applying to make this to take them along on the journey, as you called it?
Yeah, look, that's a very, very good question. I'll try and answer it in such a way, the best way as I can, but I just want to point out to your listeners that there's a fundamental difference between change and transformational change. When you apply and change, it means you're changing the environment that they operate in, but it's the same. You're not introducing something that's completely different than what they're used to. And, I learned this a lot in Sydney when I, consolidated all those control centres into the Rail Operations Centre. And when we started to introduce some of the transformational change programs we had down there. When we talk transformational change, it means that we're introducing something that the operator has never done in their career, that the operator has not experienced in anything that they've done in their operating model completely, whether it's to do with operations, maintenance, driving a train, the whole package, the whole lot of it. So when you're trying to work through the logical steps of what needs to occur, then if you take for 1 minute and think about this, train controllers today use a paper graph. In the future, it's going to be electronic train graphs when we get to this point. Now, I can tell you, as a train controller, getting your head around that is probably one of the most complex things. You need it to be dynamic. You need it to be fast. You need to be able to plot your network for the next 24 hours or 12 hours, depending on what you're doing. And when an incident or you've got a possession on or you've got a total or partial blockage, you've got to be really switched on to do that. And now you're relying on the technology with all the algorithms in it and all the possible scenarios that go with that, for that to start doing some decision making for you. So that's a significant step change. Let's talk about the train driver. A train driver is going to run on conventional signal for most of the network. Then they hit the fringe section of the tunnel heading in the north or the south area to go into the new underground network. That's going to transition into ETCS ATO. So how do you visualize the driver looking outside the window at signals and then all of a sudden looking down on the console and not even looking outside the window as they drive through the tunnel? That is transformational. Likewise for the train guard and the role that they have to play. But what about the station staff? You know, in the underground network, they're 30 metres underground here. You know, the only underground network they have right now is between Central and Fortitude Valley, and it's a cut and cover. It's just literally underneath the surface of the road. So we are talking about, you know, smoke management, fire management. We're talking about, you know, escalators that are really deep into the cabin itself, cross passages, platforms, you know, through the tunnel if they have to evacuate, brand new procedures and safe working regulations they need to apply. So when you're trying to overlay the sum of all of that, and I've only mentioned part of it, it's not all of it, when you try to overlay the sum of all of that, you're talking transformational. And the challenge we face is that you can't, and the lessons that I've learned over the years is don't try and do it in one big swoop. You know, when I built the Rail Operations Centre, one of the fundamental things is that all the technology that I wanted to apply in the Rail Operations Centre, I embedded into their working environment before the ROC opened for two fundamental reasons. One, so that way we got through all the user requirements and all the faults. And secondly, the operator got so used to it, it became the norm. So when we picked them up and put them into the Rail Operations Centre, nothing really changed because they've been operating for about 4 months in the operating environment. And this is some of the thinking that's got to happen here for us to move forward as we get closer. You know, I know train controllers won't embrace electric train graphs or, you know, that sort of environment. But I know if we handle it correctly, we allow them to use a combination of both, we get them embracing how we want to build it and how they want to use it, I think there's a chance. Now, I deal with a lot of Queensland Rail employees as it stands now. I like to get out and about, you know, whether it's in the RMC or on the ground with the guys and the girls. But to be honest, they are really smart people. They are good at what they do. And I'm not taking anything away from the Queenslander. I feel like, you know, I can talk their language coming up through the grades. But in essence, what we're asking them to do for this particular railway, we need to make sure that we bring them on the journey. That's the only way we're going to get this done. And, you know, right now we're looking at human factor experts, change experts to come in and give us a hand with that sort of stuff. And whether it's here with us in the Cross River Rail Delivery Authority or with Queensland Rail, it doesn't matter. We're together connected as one, and doesn't matter whether they're here or embedded in Queensland or embedded with the contractors. We really need to get to the fixation that we're building one railway for Queensland and one in, all in, you know, and that's where we're heading with this thing. And I think we'll be very successful.
Yeah, there is a certain risk in having people that are very smart and know exactly what they're doing when you go into such a transformational change. Because if they don't acknowledge that this is a transformational change and they still think they can handle it with the experience that they've had from the old world, from the legacy environment, as I call it, that may actually be a risk compared to having somebody who acknowledges, who recognizes, okay, that's a major change. So a number of the things that I previously based my career on and my job performance on may no longer apply. So I have to relearn.
Yeah.
So that's certainly
and look,
important. Yeah.
It is also important to note that they're not the first to go through this journey. So learning from other jurisdictions that have gone through it, you know, I'm a big believer in putting people in a plane, putting the operators in a plane and sending them to Sydney or sending them to Melbourne or somewhere where what they're about to experience is already fundamentally operating in their world. And they sort of see it happening and see how it's been applied. And they think, well, okay, well, this is not as bad as I really thought it was. You know, the three things that the staff would always ask you is, say, what is the change and why are you changing it? What's in it for me? Like, is this going to be so bloody difficult for me that I can't handle? And have I got job security? Predominantly, it really does come down to some fundamentals like that. And it's not because, we're doing this for efficiency gains. No, we're doing this for growth of the future. We're building a new railway here. We're modernising a railway that's going to actually grow, and Queensland is growing far faster than any other state in Australia, and they need a solid transportation to get them around. This is what will deliver that. But I have to say, this is only a step. This is the first step of many projects that will come down the pipeline after Cross River Rail. You know, you can only see what's on the job site there for TMR, on the website for TMR. That shows you quite a few things coming through the pipeline.
Yes, and maybe that job security that you just mentioned is actually a blessing in that you could possibly use it as a hook to say, well, there will be job security if you adapt to the new world, to the new technology, more so than if you basically reject it and try to defend against it, or try to cling to the old ways of doing things. So
yeah, and it goes deeper than that too.
Yes.
It does go deeper, Frank, because we're going to need more trains. So how do you operate trains? You need drivers and guards. You need more people supervising the network. You need more station staff doing their job. You need more maintainers. It's a story that you've got to tell them that they understand in their own language, and this is fundamentally one of those good stories. And yes, they'll do things slightly different. Yeah. Significantly different. But it'll be for the betterment of how they do their job in the future. And it becomes their norm. Once it becomes their norm, the next project will even get easier, and the one after that will get easier again.
Yes.
It's the cycle.
Yeah. So in the training I'm doing on mindset, which I think is pretty unique, I'm talking about a compelling future, that you need to draw a future vision for them that they find attractive, that they're looking forward to, because then it basically pulls them along towards the change, and not so much, I have to overcome this hurdle. It's something where they might want to go once they have accepted and realized that this may actually be a positive change for their own job security, for maybe even making their jobs more interesting compared to previously, where everything was more like business as usual, routine, nothing new for the last 30 years, stuff like that. Yeah.
No, it is good stuff.
Yeah. I'm conscious of your time. I definitely don't want to take any more than what you promised me to, which was already quite generous. But one thing I definitely wanted to address with you that you mentioned in your LinkedIn profile was that how did you phrase it? But it was about getting projects back on track. Yeah, especially when it comes to cost overrun and to budget overruns. So, I mean, I'm not telling you anything new when I say that in the most recent past in Australia, we had a few quite shocking examples of high-profile projects with massive blowouts in cost and in budgets, and Cross River Rail certainly within Queensland would fit smack bang into the same category. So how do you think you can make sure that you stay on track with the cost and with the budget? Because in your previous answers, you could hear it time and again, there's this, and there's also 25 other things, if not 50 other things. The longer you think about it, the more stuff bubbles to the surface, and it gets more and more complex. And in an environment like this, it's almost kind of understandable if, as it gets more and more complex in your mind, also the time frames to deliver go up and the costs to deliver go up. How do you steer against that? How do you make sure that a project stays on track or gets back on track if it starts slipping a bit?
Yeah, look, there's plenty of examples where we've had to do many of that sort of stuff you talk about. But just if I generalise the conversation rather than focusing on here, if we stop and reflect between 2019 and 2022 for that period of time, we got hit with something that no one in the world would have experienced in the past. Well, before we were born anyway. You know, when you talk about COVID hitting the way it did and the impact that had across industry as a whole, 3 years of disruptive, some shut the network down, like shut productivity down. Others kept going and used it as advantage. But, the supply chain was disrupted significantly. The labour hire went up through the roof significantly. You had the war that broke out between Russia and that sort of had an impact on all things that we were doing as well. So this wasn't an isolated case for anything like Cross River Rail. This is right across the board. And when you start to get into those sort of levels of that, you need to now become someone who's really focused on those three elements, time and cost in particular. Now, what I've done in past lives is I've always, as a sponsor, project sponsor in many of the jobs that I've done in Sydney and part thereof up here, you got to be an active sponsor. Now, I've always been of the belief if you want to be a sponsor and you don't want to get yourself involved, things are going to hit you and it's too late to react. If you want to be a good sponsor, project sponsor that operates in that environment, then get yourself involved with it. And I've always been very committed and involved in all aspects of whatever project we're delivering, whether it's a mega one like this one or whether it's a rail operations centre for $320 million or you're rebuilding Hornsby Junction for $170 million, whatever it is, you've got to be actively involved in it. I'm not suggesting you go into the weeds and into the details, but I'm saying a couple of layers up where you actually have some sort of control mechanism in place. Now, there's been plenty of jobs where we've had to recover. No doubt about that. The Rail Operations Centre was $30 million over budget at one point in time where we've had to think about how do we, and probably about 6 months late at some point in time, but we managed to pull that back. And we did that fundamentally by a few simple things about, getting in people who can help navigate through it. You don't have all the answers. You got to get the right experienced people to help you navigate through it. But things like value engineering, that building was 6 stories and much wider. We brought it down to 4 stories and narrowed it a bit. So that brought back $10 million. We looked at some of the systems and software applications and contractors that we had and how they were, the burn rate that they were doing. And I had to re-engineer all the commercials, the contracts that were coming through because it wasn't set favourably for the organisation. The actual favour went to the contractors. We really didn't structure that. When I took that over, the way the contracts were and the commercials were set up wasn't helping. So you had to be courageous enough to sort of take a grip of it and then start to work through and make some tough decisions. But when you promise the operator you're going to get this and then you change what you're going to get them, they need to understand why you're changing it, because all the best intentions in the world, you want to give them that, but you don't have the money or you don't have the time to build it and you're going to give them something different. You need to make sure that they come along that journey with you. So the best advice that I would always use in these big projects is, don't be afraid. Have the courage to have a look at what you're building. Be close to the action if you need to be. Like really spend quality time out on the field, going through the project, look, see, touch, and smell it. But also, run your program management meetings. Get your financial guys checking the dollars and reporting back on it. And then when the time comes and you do have to pull that lever, you're already on top of the detail and you know what you can do to make it happen. And you just simply have the courage to do it. And you've got to walk through it. And no 2 projects are the same. And up here is completely different. I, as you said, started off in your entry as a deputy program director. Do I see myself as that today? No, not at all. I spend my quality time in the brownfield space as a project director in the brownfield environment, trying to navigate through the complexity of turning this railway on in a brownfield space and then connecting it to the underground and working with the Queensland rail folk who, got a balance between what they feel like is a massive wish list that, oh yeah, here's a chance for me to get something really spectacular versus, which I call double gold plate, versus, this is what you need to run your railway. And then you use the balance of that money to support you somewhere else in something else. And and then getting that look and feel with them as well. So it is what it is, but I think the project management is an art in its own right. And the only way I've had success in the past is to stay on top of it. And the only way to stay on top of it is to forward project with all your S-curves and whatever else, looking for that pinch point and constantly driving what risk would look like. So if you have a good risk profile, you're genuinely concerned about your risks and you put your dollar value to that risk and then you manage the outflow of that. the results will pay for themselves. And not all the time you succeed. Many times I've been over budget and thought this is not good, and had to live with it and go ask, please, sir, can I have some more? And there's other times where we've actually said, no, we can do this, and we just grind in and work together and crawl it back.
Yeah.
One thing you can do it.
When you mentioned active sponsorship, what I immediately thought about is your reputation of being on site as an executive, not just for getting your picture taken with the Premier or the Transport Minister, but actually being there for the staff, talking to them, getting a better impression of what's going on. And also, I think lifting the spirits of the guys on site by saying, well, this guy's really interested in what we're doing here. He tries to understand, he tries to help us by listening to problems that we have, trying to resolve those things. The question is probably more hypothetical. Tony, how important is it for executives to have this kind of presence on site?
A good leader, and I've said this all along, a good leader embraces and looks after their workforce. You cannot do that by simply sitting in your office and sitting in meetings all day. I absolutely spend 4 to 6 hours a week on site somewhere, religiously. And when I go out there, I don't take a cast of thousands with me for management. I just go myself. I ring the site inspector or the site office and I wander out there and I do the pre-brief with them. So I'm sitting there listening to the pre-brief. I sign the induction sheet and then we go for a walk. And as we walk in, I make it my interest to make sure I stop and say hello to everybody that's working and thank them for what they're doing. Don't do it from your office. If anybody's listening, get out there amongst the troops.
The perfect closing words. It was kind of the answer that I expected from you, but I still think for all the listeners who may not know you quite that well, it was really instructive and one of the key lessons to take away from this conversation here. Tony, thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best for your remaining tenure at Cross River Rail and that you get the project into service without major disruption, without major heartache. All the best. And we may talk again at some stage in the future and maybe even on this platform here. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, Frank. All the best.
Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high-capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. What I'm offering in this training course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, is that every month there's a new training module with 5 examples of an outdated legacy mindset, the suggestion of a new mindset more suitable for a high capacity railway, and how to get from the old to the new mindset. So those modules will be repeated every month for an entire year. So in total, we are talking about 60 different examples how to get from an old mindset to a more suitable new mindset. And the cost for this is only $10 per example. So this can be paid monthly, this can be paid for a year. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take. Hi, it's Dr. Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple and bye for now. Thank you for listening.